Okay, we're going to do things a little differently today, guys. I want to follow up a little bit to the talk I had last week. Now, that was a live recording that I did as a bonus episode called I Had to Fire My Best Friend. And I kind of want to follow up about that because there's so much more I can say. The biggest thing is how that has affected my mental health. And I feel like that's an important part of the conversation that I should dive deeper into because I think a lot of people have had similar experiences and not realize that they're not alone. We're going to dive into that this week. Hi, my name is Jamie. I have a bachelor's degree in psychology, a master's degree in Christian counseling of substance abuse and addictive disorders. I completed my internship at Arizona State Prison, and that's where I subsequently became a licensed addiction counselor. In 2021, sort of had a midlife crisis after taking care of my grandmother with dementia for a while and decided that I would like to write my story full time as somebody who is in recovery from methamphetamine use. Realized that wasn't really what I wanted to be when I grew up, and somehow I have stumbled into writing, blogging, being a TikToker, and now having my own podcast. So here we are. I just want to do a little bit of a housekeeping before we get started, and then we will dive in a little bit more to today's topic. So, today we're going to talk a little bit about just kind of feeling like you're in an abusive friendship and how that can really affect your mental health as a person while you're in it, but then after you sort of come out of that situation. I'm not going to say that this is similar to being in a domestic violence relationship because I do not have experience with that, but I am going to say that I do think there is probably some overlap as far as the emotions and things like that go. I am no longer a licensed counselor. I have no desire to continue being a licensed counselor. Very much love being the mental health advocate that I am. I like to clarify this because I want to make sure that everybody knows that everything that I am saying on this podcast is experience, my opinion, or educational. And unless we have an expert on and they are identified by credentials, we do not claim to be the expert on anything here at Let's Talk Mental Health. I also want to make sure that you're aware of the fact that this is not a substitute for counseling of any sort. Again, I am not a licensed counselor. I am just some random lady on the internet sharing stories on a podcast. I don't know if any of the topics I will be diving into today will be triggering because I am sort of shooting from the hip. I'm doing this a little bit differently. I don't have the monologue going. However, if at any time you do feel like you may be triggered by the topic at hand, please feel free to exit on out of this podcast. I want to keep everybody safe here. If this does bring up any type of emotion while you're listening and it causes you to feel in distress of any sort, or maybe like you need to talk to somebody, I do highly encourage that you dial the 988 number if you are in the US or Canada. All right, without further ado, we are going to go ahead and get started. He was in an abusive relationship with a friend, and this was somebody I had been friends with for 14 years, and I did not realize that I was in an abusive friendship with a friend. I had to learn that the hard way. And maybe the signs were always there, and maybe they weren't. I don't know. Other people can give their opinion if they like. Not really concerned with that. It's not my business. We had talked on and off over the years. And then because I knew she was a single mom and she might be interested in working from home, for some reason I thought it would be a great idea to bring her into the TikTok world. Over on TikTok, I have a live creator network, which is called Metamorphosis. What we do over there is we help creators, especially new creators, brand new to TikTok or just new to going live, learn how to grow and monetize on their live platforms, help them discover their niches, help them discover ideas. We provide a lot of education and support. There are many different ways to make money over there on TikTok, and we try to provide support in every aspect that we're able to. So I thought this would be a great opportunity to sort of bring her on and help her make money because we offer our own bonuses and incentives. And she was like, "Yeah, I'm all in." And it was essentially, it was great at first. I may not have been clear about what her expectations of me should have been. And I realize that now, but I was still very new in that journey. I opened my creator network in October and I brought her in like November, late November. And so I think maybe there is a possibility that I didn't communicate. Not really sure. I was still learning the system of how I did everything over there. At the time, because I knew I wanted to build up this podcast, I was doing a lot of talks live. So I would just go live and talk about whatever was on my heart or whatever I had written out for the day to discuss. I would do this every single day. I tried to do it at the same time, and I was really starting to build up my audience. And then I would take those recordings and I would clip them down and edit out all the little TikTok things. Hey, thanks for the gifts. Thanks for the heart me. Hello, so and so. Ahs, haws, bad sound, everything. I was doing this for a while, and then one day I happened to pop on over into her live, and she informed me that she was mad at me. She was mad at me because I was going live every day and I wasn't spending time with her. So I said, hey, I'll try to make more time to pop into your lives, etc., etc. As time went on, it became I wasn't giving her enough at all, and she just started asking for more. It started with I needed to show up for every single karaoke night that she ran, and if I didn't, I wouldn't hear the end of it, to she pretty much insisted on having her lives and saying that I was the only person who could moderate her room. And she started doing her lives at the times that I was going live every day. And of course, at the time, I didn't see this for what it was. I had a lot of things going on. And she knew this. I'm in litigation with the US government. This is something I'm having to do by myself pro se, and that is probably my number one stressor besides running a business. I feel like she sort of took advantage of the fact that I was just feeling very all over the place. Things I might have normally been like, who the fuck do you think you are? I just kind of tolerated. Yeah. I brought her on as a mentor over in what I do on TikTok. I don't like to call people managers when they help manage creators. I call them mentors, right? Because at the end of the day, we're all equal. That's the way I run. That's my philosophy for that business. At the end of the day, we're all equal, right? We're trying to grow and learn, and maybe we're here for a side hustle. Maybe we're here for a full-time hustle. Maybe we're just here to have fun. But nobody wants to be managed, but people don't mind being mentored, and that's my philosophy. So I brought her on as a mentor, thinking this would be a great opportunity for her because as we built and grew, she could make money going live, but she could also make money helping mentor other creators. And I don't know if I went wrong bringing her in altogether or if I went wrong bringing her on as a mentor, but eventually it got to where I had no time for me, and she demanded so much of my time that I couldn't do anything. I couldn't keep up with anything. I was exhausted. I felt like my medications were not working for depression. I felt like my medications were not working for ADHD. I couldn't sleep. When I was awake, I would be lucky if I got 2 things done on my to-do list. My mornings would generally start where I try to get as much as I can done while it's still quiet in my home. And she started taking that from me too. So then she had to call and talk to me. And then I had to help manage her live. And then she couldn't even be on time for her own live. And I would say, hey, can we adjust this? Yada, yada. Anyway, this all led up to the proverbial straw. And if you want the whole story, go check out that episode. It's called I Had to Fire My Best Friend. Eventually, she was rude to me and rude to some of our mutuals for the last time. And I finally snapped. And I did not appreciate her being rude, and she didn't like me setting boundaries, and she told me to grow up, and I told her she was fired, and that was it. We were done. I have not talked to her, do not care to talk to her. I already am in the Mariah Carey versus J-Lo I don't know her stage. I'm only sharing this because I didn't realize the impact that it was going to have on my life. So after I get through that, I meet with some of my other mentors, and they're all like, yeah, we kind of sort of didn't care for her anyway, but she was like your people, and it is what it is. So we move on, and I start just trying to rebuild my life. She had me so stressed out and walking on eggshells so bad that I did not even know how bad it was until she was gone. I didn't sleep for 2 or 3 days after that because I was so like, I can't believe I did this, but the adrenaline just had me wired but tired. So I would sleep and wake up and sleep and wake up. I ended up writing a book in 3 days, a rough draft of a book in 3 days. That's how on top of the world I was. It was like I bounced back. And then once that sort of stabilized a little bit, I started realizing every routine, every system I had developed for myself to be able to function as somebody who struggles with focusing and attention, I had to start back over with. So I started slowly rebuilding that back. But at the same time, I started realizing all of the things that she took from me little by little that I didn't notice as I started trying to reincorporate them little by little back into my routine. I also noticed a lot of things that I started doing because of her behavior. So I would wake up and be worried, like, what fire am I going to have to put out today? What drama is she going to start today? Who is she going to be rude to? I'm trying to market a business. My whole brand is built on mental health and acceptance and love and tolerance of people in their authentic selves. And if she didn't like them, you would know she didn't like them because she was very apparent about it. She didn't hide it. It was affecting my ability to recruit. It was affecting the morale of the people around me. Well, one of the reasons I work for myself is because I hate the corporate structure. I hate micromanaging. I hate shitty morale. And I really, really, really hate when disrespect is tolerated in the workplace. Even though we're all contractors at the end of the day, right? Nobody wants to be around that. And it was to a place where I couldn't even go into someone else's live and be on their panel because she would follow me and then she would start trying to tell me or that person how they should be running their room. A lot of these things had to be undone because I could go live again and I didn't have to worry about putting out those fires. I didn't have to worry about what was I going to say wrong or do wrong today that was going to get me bitched at for hours and hours or texted at. After the fact, I found out she was having entire meetings behind my back telling me how I couldn't even handle my own company and she was going to take it over and blah, blah, blah. All of this just built up and made me question everything. Even after she couldn't gaslight me anymore, she had taught me to gaslight myself. Am I really doing too much? Am I really overstressed? I'm the kind of person, I always have a lot going on. I've been that way since childhood. I grew up in chaos. I grew up in dysfunction. I've learned how to adapt. And even though I'm not in chaos and dysfunction now, because of that experience, I can adapt and I can manage a lot of things at once. And I think for whatever reason, she maybe didn't want that for me, right? And there are even times where I think like she was trying to soul swap, whatever. But I think at the end of the day, it really comes down to she had me questioning myself. I really feel like I am a highly capable person, like I'm a highly intelligent person. I can teach myself anything if it interests me. That's just who I am. I taught myself how to crochet. I taught myself how to learn Spanish. I'm teaching myself law for malpractice medical lawsuit. If something means a lot to me or I need to learn about it or I'm interested in it, I will not stop. That's why I went into psychology as my major. I'm fascinated by it. I love it. I know how to approach all the different personalities. And I've known how to do that since before I went to school for psychology, because unfortunately in my family, there is a lot of mentally ill, dysfunctional relatives. I started thinking I was dumb. I didn't know what I was doing. What was I thinking? Maybe I was taking on too much. And then, I had the struggles at home too, right? I have a husband, I have a daughter. Not every day is perfect, right? We're a family. We have family issues sometimes. And the last year, well, actually since 2023, we've been dealing with an extensive trauma that I will say I believe and that I allege is at the result of psychiatric malpractice. If you want to know the details, go look it up. It's public. It's in Pacer. But that is something that my family has been dealing with for almost 2 years. And that was triggered by the fact that's around the time my grandmother started declining in health, even though she was in nursing care, but I still was responsible for her because I moved her here to Arizona. My brother and I had a mutual acquaintance commit suicide in a very horrific way, and it re-triggered our trauma from the loss of our father. My husband was going through a lot, and so it's been a rough couple of years, and so it's led to friction at times because that's what happens, right? Sometimes it causes issues within the family, and it even affected my daughter. It affected my adult children too, but it also affected my daughter. I confided in her about these things, and she told me that it was my fault because I wasn't taking care of myself and I was a shit mom and a shit wife. She said some things about my daughter that were inappropriate, judgmental, but definitely also inappropriate. I struggled with, in the rebound and the recovery phase, I struggled with not gaslighting myself. I struggled with realizing none of those things have changed about me. Just someone tried to convince me that those things were true. Like, I was in a place that I hadn't been in a long time. My self-esteem had been lower than it had been in a long time. And, you know, one of the best things that ever happened from this friendship breakup was I learned who really did genuinely care about me. And these are people that were newer members of my life. But I also learned that she was holding me back from a lot of opportunities because she kept me so stressed out. And doors started opening for me once I ended that relationship. I started really struggling with imposter syndrome. And there are people who say, oh, that's not a real thing. Okay, it's not a real thing until you've been told that even with all your education, that basically you're not even good at being a wife or a mom, so you probably can't be good at anything else too, right? And even though she didn't say you can't be good at anything else, that's where my brain went. And I'm somebody who, I admit that I've had a lifelong struggle with mental health, and I feel like my vulnerabilities were taken and weaponized against me. The thing that I think is really interesting in all of this is, before I was in recovery, if you told me I couldn't do something, I believed you. And at some point in that journey, I stopped believing that. And if somebody told me I couldn't do something, I went from I believe you to I'm going to prove you wrong. I am the person where I will call your bluff at some point. If you, like, whatever you think you're going to get out of me, I'm going to do the opposite. If you think you're going to get a reaction, I'm not going to react. If you think that you're going to manipulate your own way, I will go so far to the opposite end of whatever it is you think you're going to get out of that. I won't do it. And that was a lesson I learned in recovery, because we can't allow people to have power over our lives. To a certain degree, that's what I allowed. Even though there's a lot of rambling in there, that is probably the shortest kind of Reader's Digest version of what I had been dealing with and what I had started recovering from. I fired her on April 21st of 2026. We are now in July. We're about 90 days after, and a couple weeks ago, I just got to where I felt like I could finally talk about it, because I had to process so much. And it did affect my relationship with my daughter and my husband, because I thought I wasn't doing a good job. And I thought that every time they maybe gave me some feedback the wrong way, that they were just reinforcing that belief. So it was creating friction. And, you know, I'm happy to say we're in a better place now, but, you know, we are in a place where we severely need family therapy. And that is one of my goals once we get through this litigation, is to get family therapy, because we're in a rural community. Nobody wants to take VA care for family therapy, and we are going to have to pay out of pocket. Those are my goals. Those are my hopes, and we're going to get there. I know that we are going to get there. I know that everything I've been through the last couple of years was a test of endurance, right? Because our biggest struggles help us get our biggest strengths. So we're going to dive a little more into this because while this story may not be like something people out there are going through, I think we've all had a toxic friend, right? And my friend was absolutely toxic. And maybe she had always been that way. And I just didn't see it till the last year. Or maybe we had both changed so much over the years that we grew that way. And I always think of like the make new friends, but keep the old summer silver and the other are gold, or like how we outgrow our friends. Maybe that's it. I don't know. The fact that she really struggled to have friendships, relationships, and even some of her children were not speaking to her makes me think there's a common denominator in this, but it's not my problem and it's not my place to judge. I felt the emotional aftermath is really where I kind of stabilized. I was like high on life for like 3 days because it was such a relief. And I noticed immediately like I was not feeling the severe depression that I had been feeling for months. I thought that that was a culmination of all of these things, my grandmother passing away, my litigation, my new business that I just started, family things. I really just thought it was all that. And then I realized it wasn't. It wasn't that. And things that I used to be passionate about, I just felt so drained I didn't even want to do, like writing. My big thing is name it. Name it for what it is. Name it for what it is, because that's how we have to know what it is to talk about it. And we also have to feel every emotion to get through it. One of the things that I struggled with as an addict was I didn't want to feel negative emotions. I was coping with PTSD. I was coping with a divorce at that time from my first husband. I didn't want to feel anything. So that's why, one of many reasons why I turned to substance use. And in recovery, I had to learn how to feel everything. I had to raw dog life. I couldn't just feel the happy parts. And so my philosophy now is we have to feel all the uncomfortable moments so that we can enjoy the happy moments. And when we're happy, we never say, oh God, how come I'm so happy? But when we're struggling, we're always like, why is this happening to me? The idea is to get out of that mindset and just embrace it for what it is, no matter how uncomfortable. I don't think I am fully over these emotions, but I do feel like they're starting to exist less and less in my life. And in this emotional aftermath, I felt embarrassed. I felt shame. And I felt uncomfortable realizing I was in an abusive friendship. And we're not even in the same state. So it was like, how did I let this happen to me? And I remember the day before we had a really bad fight, the day before I fired her as my friend and as a staff member, thinking, I'm not your fucking bitch. Like, you are not going to talk to me like I'm a fucking piece of shit scum between, the trash and the sidewalk crack. I guess I knew we were getting there. And that final day, I couldn't even hear her voice. I was so disgusted by it. Like, my body was so repulsed before my brain was ready to accept that I was repulsed. And I remember that last day, every word she said, I was just like, I can't stand the sound of her voice. And then it was just so embarrassing to see that like everybody saw it but me. Everybody saw it but me. But you know what? All of those people who saw it before me were so supportive, and I appreciate every single one of them. I think that covers the backstory. And it's hard to be 44 years old and realize I was in a toxic friendship. I should have seen it, but sometimes we don't see it from the inside. But also, she embarrassed me. She embarrassed me, and now I'm embarrassed, and I feel shame. It's kind of like when somebody cheats on you, and you're the last one to know. Everybody in town knows but you. Like, that's how I relate that emotion. Like, everybody could see she was not a good person, but me. And I think I did sort of subconsciously start seeing it because I did get to places where I would avoid her and things like that. But I also started a lot of really bad habits because of the amount of time she encroached upon in the last year. Not only did I have to process how I felt, the shame, the embarrassment, even just like a little bit of the aftermath was still stressful, right? Because when you're used to walking on eggshells and then you don't have to do it anymore, it's weird. Like reclaiming my life and reclaiming my time was so weird for me because I was so used to being in fight or flight mode that I didn't know how to relax. I constantly felt the need to over explain myself. I was constantly making excuses for me. I was making excuses for other people, and I was apologizing for other people because she would say things like, and so hasn't called me. I know you know what that's about. Well, I'm so sorry. Like maybe they have things going on. So I'm apologizing and making excuses for them. She could have just gone right to the source, but she's guilting me about it. In a state where I find myself over apologizing. I'm still in a state where my thoughts still don't always clearly flow together, even in things that are unrelated to this. Well, I am working on reclaiming my life, reclaiming my time, reclaiming my joy, and reclaiming my intelligence, my authenticity, and who I am. I was in an abusive friendship, was a hard pill to swallow because it's like, how? You're a grown adult. You should have seen it. But not only that, she didn't even live close to you. So, like, how did you let her get away with it? Well, because little by little, it became about now I'm just trying to protect other people from her. If you've ever had to eat a piece of humble pie, I got to eat the entire fucking pie. That's how I felt. I still have moments where I'm embarrassed when I think about it. Last week, when I talked about firing my friends, I really felt like I was open and ready to share that story. And this week, I want to focus on sitting with what came in the aftermath of that entire situation. There's a very specific kind of shame that hits when you realize a friendship, especially a friendship that maybe like you valued, or a relationship was abusive and you didn't see it in real time. Maybe we don't see it because we're trying to protect ourselves somehow. I don't even know. We're not going to focus on the psychology of that today. I am not proud of how long it took me to realize what was going on. I don't want to say blinded because it was there. It was right in front of me. Just for whatever reason, you could have slapped me with all of the red flags and I still would have been like, where? And so I'm not proud of that. But I am proud of the fact that I did finally acknowledge it. I did finally say, this is not okay. And I finally got honest about it, not only with them, but with myself. This is not okay. A friend does not tell you what a piece of shit you are. You can get constructive feedback without them insulting who you are as a person. A friend does not go around calling people that are not even her friends, they're your friends, behind your back and trying to trash you and get inside information. A friend does not embarrass you in public and then when you address it with them, apologize like this. I didn't even know that I did that. I am so sorry. Are you sure I did that? I didn't even think I did that. Well, if I did do that, I didn't mean to do that. If I did do that, I was just doing that in response to you. Literally 3 different things and 1 apology. Friends don't do that. Friends own the fact that they made bad choices. I had to go and acknowledge to all of my creators who had to deal with this person that I made a bad business choice and that I was sorry and that I would do better from there on. I'm a full transparency person. I believe in full transparency. Not everything needs to be everybody's business, but there are some things they deserve to know so that they can know where they stand. And I went and took accountability. Like, this would have never happened to you, and you, had it not been for me. And I am so sorry. And I promise to do better. Once I sat with these things, I realized that this wasn't just about the so-called friendship, right? I keep saying it was my not friend that I thought was a friend. I realized this wasn't about the friendship ending. It was about the way that I talk to myself and the way that I relate to myself when dealing with conflict or inside of a conflict. That's where this over apology habit started coming from. Now, I used to do this many years ago. And then I sort of outgrew it as I learned and grew. And then all of a sudden, I was back to it. The very first time I noticed it happening was actually one of my kids pointed it out. And they were like, Mom, it's not a big deal. Stop apologizing, right? It's not a big deal. Stop over explaining. Like, you're taking a 300-page essay to say something that could be said in one sentence. And that's when I started realizing, wow, where is this coming from? And then I was like, oh, I must have really bad anxiety, because that like is coming from a place of anxiety and fear, right? Why else would I do that? It happened so gradually, it started to feel automatic. And it feels automatic because you are constantly apologizing. And one person is causing you to constantly apologize to everybody. I was apologizing for having my own needs. I am so sorry I couldn't answer the phone today because my son had a seizure and he's in the hospital. Or I am so sorry I couldn't answer the phone today, but I had prior obligations. I'm so sorry I couldn't come to your stupid karaoke night because I was exhausted. I was constantly having to make excuses. I was constantly having to apologize for needing to meet my own needs, needing to meet my daughter's needs, needing to have my own time, my own space, and to be honest with myself. And I was constantly apologizing for setting boundaries. It went from, I don't like the way you spoke to me publicly, and the apology of, I don't think I did that, but if I did, I'm sorry. And if I did it, I didn't really mean to do it, to I was apologizing for misunderstanding. I was feeling responsible for everybody else. I was feeling responsible for things that I wasn't responsible for. I was feeling responsible for other people's discomfort. I was trying to soften everything with an apology. Like, if I can just apologize, maybe that'll take some of the edginess out of this conversation, some of the friction out of this situation. Maybe she won't embarrass me today. The difference between accountability and self-erasure was hard for me to see. There's a difference between being accountable and just changing a piece of who you are or turning off a piece of who you are for other people. I don't ever want to shrink myself down for someone else. I am who I am. And you love me or you hate me for it, and that's okay. I accept it either way. Some of the things that I was saying were like apologizing for things that hadn't even happened yet, future things. My friend, she's just a little harsh. She doesn't mean anything by it. She's harmless. She's just a little brash. So just ignore it. I know she comes across kind of rude, right? So I'm apologizing for someone else's behavior. I was apologizing like I'm trying to preemptively calm down a room that's not even upset yet. Sometimes I wasn't even actually sorry. I was just nervous because I didn't know what was going to happen, right? I was waiting for the proverbial straw, right? There's a difference between being accountable and making yourself smaller. I didn't understand that, and I should have. I used to be a therapist. I should have understood that, right? But when someone has your brain in fight or flight for so long, you don't start seeing those things within yourself. And I'm a very self-aware person, but in this one area, it was like walking into a room with no lights on and not being able to see anything because I just didn't see shit. Like I said earlier, red flags could have slapped me in the face and I still would have been like, where? Now, this is going to bring me to the part of why I'm really wanting to unpack this, and that is boundaries feel really emotionally loud for me because it wasn't something I was always able to do. I used to be very passive. I used to be so passive that I would have to be irritable to finally set a boundary. And I remember a friend of mine telling me, I kind of like you when you're irritated because you put your foot down a lot more. And I just don't feel like you're assertive enough sometimes. And I've never forgotten that. And because of that person, they actually helped me really grow that side of me. And she was probably more of a friend to me than this person. Now we're going to kind of pivot just a little bit, right? When we set boundaries, especially if you're not used to setting them, it can be difficult because you start feeling guilty, especially if you're used to being flexible, right? So I'm going through something right now where I have people that I have done work for that have not paid me in over a year. And our agreement was pay within X amount of time, and they haven't paid me. And I finally said, I am not doing any more work until I'm paid. Period. Not doing any more work until I'm paid. I probably let that go on entirely too long before saying that, because boundaries can sometimes be uncomfortable. Am I going to burn this friendship? Am I going to burn this relationship? Am I going to burn this rapport that I have with this client? Well, they're not thinking about me and how them not paying me affects my ability to make payroll. They're not thinking about how they're not paying me affects my ability to run my business. Because at the end of the day, it's a business, right? And it can make you feel guilty and you start gaslighting yourself, right? Well, probably would have put my foot down a lot sooner with these things had I not been stressed out. So we're still in the aftermath of that chaos, right? And you have to think, like, I only struggled from November to with this person because that's when it really started getting shitty. 5 months of my life felt like 10 fucking years. I was always the flexible one. I'm always the pragmatic one. I'm always the devil's advocate. Well, let me look at it from this angle. And I had to stop being that person and just see it for what it was. That affected my ability to make boundaries, especially with that person. Boundaries can feel rude, especially when you're the one that's always like, you want to keep the peace, or you're a people pleaser, or you're the one trying to be the bigger person. At the end of the day, you know what else is rude? People who don't respect boundaries. And I have to keep reframing that so that I can get it through my head. And I'm having to redo all the work that I did for many years and had no issue doing. Guilt is not always proof that you did something wrong. We feel guilty because that person has led us to think we are a bad person for saying no. I am not a bad person because I said no. I am at capacity. What I need for me and my mental health is more important. Why should I feel guilty about that? People might react badly to boundaries because they benefited from you not having them, and that's what I learned. I had boundaries with everybody, but she was able to push. And one of the things I learned, she did this to me, my ex-husband did this to me. She would just ask me to extend the line. And I don't mean this literally, I mean this metaphorically. It would be extend the line, extend the line, extend the line. And there is no line. There is no line. There is no boundary. It's a free for all shit show. She benefited from my inability to set firm enough boundaries with her. And then when I did, she didn't like it. I was the bad person. I was the dumb person. I was the person who didn't know what I was doing. Discomfort in setting boundaries does not equal you being a bad person. It does not mean that you are cruel. And this is a lesson that I had to relearn. I am not a cruel person for saying, I am tired of you talking to me like that. I am tired of your crap. I've got no contact and low contact for less things than that. Just because somebody is unhappy with boundaries does not mean boundaries are wrong. And this is something I'm relearning. Just because they don't like the fact that I don't like what they did to me doesn't mean I'm wrong. It just means they're feeling called out. They're feeling like, oh God, how dare you tell me that I'm being rude to you? How dare you confront me about my poor behavior? And I am learning that guilt is not always a compass, because if guilt was a compass, my God, everything makes me feel guilty. Oh, look at that cute little dog that I can't adopt because I already have 4. It's a boundary. Guilt is not always a compass. It's not going to point you in the right direction. You should feel guilty when you do something wrong and you hurt someone you love. And oftentimes, how I am starting to reapproach the guilt aspect of things is, do you think they feel guilty about what they're doing to me? Because if they're not feeling guilty, I shouldn't feel bad for setting a boundary. Peacekeeping is not the same thing as being kind. You can be kind, you can be polite, and you can be tactful. That does not define peacekeeping, right? Peacekeeping could be, let's not call each other names, but let's hear each other's side. And we may not agree. Honestly, part of why this hits me so hard is because that friendship itself trained me to doubt myself, the gaslighting. And I think that's what's probably had the most negative impact on me. And that's okay because we're coming out of that. Because you know what? Again, so many doors have opened for me and I am in such a better place now. But in that moment, it didn't feel like it. In that moment, I was like, maybe I'm wrong. But I'll tell you what I never did. In all of the things I've questioned myself about since then and during that time, not once questioned the decision to fire that person as a friend and from my life. Never once questioned it. Never once. And I am so proud of that because I question everything. I question everything. Did I lock my door? What made the friendship unhealthy? My vulnerabilities were used against me. They were weaponized against me. Instead of being a supportive friend and understanding where I was coming from, respecting my boundaries, understanding that you're not the only person who I work with out of 50 some odd people, but you are getting all of my time. That was unhealthy. And the inability to be vulnerable, the inability to know that I was sitting here one day in one of the worst mental states and I couldn't call that person. That is not a healthy friendship. Now I understand certain friends have certain things that we do, right? I know who I can call in the middle of the night if I break down on the side of the road. I know who I can call in the middle of the night if I am crying. It should have been her, but I knew that I couldn't call her in those moments because she was using it against me. The pattern should have been the biggest eye opener for me. And it took my body recognizing the patterns for my brain to connect that pattern. There was a lot of subtle manipulation. And because I was resistant to the manipulative moves, it made the aggression worse. If I said, no, I'm not doing this, then they went behind my back and tried to make things happen anyway. Or I was getting yelled at for everything constantly because I wasn't making the right choice because I couldn't think clearly. Well, yeah, because I couldn't think clearly because that person was keeping me in fight or flight. Subtle manipulation was one way. Emotional whiplash. 1 minute you're my best friend and I'm telling everybody how wonderful you are and how you saved my life. The next minute I'm yelling at you in front of other people, embarrassing you in front of other people, humiliating you in front of other people, calling you up and telling you what a piece of shit you are. That's why I was on eggshells. It was like playing Russian roulette. I didn't know what I was going to get. I would wake up and be like, am I going to have to put out fires today or is it going to be a good day? Am I going to need to preemptively text and apologize for not being available all fucking day because you don't know when you want to go live? Guilt, pressure, and dismissal of anything that related to how I felt or boundaries that I set was, you're just being petty. Oh, you're just being ridiculous. Why are you always fighting with me on this? This is so stupid. You know I'm right. I lost confidence in my own memory. Did I say that? It got to where I was saving my text messages because I needed to make sure that whatever I said, I had receipts. You shouldn't have to do that. You shouldn't. That is not healthy at all. I was explaining behavior away. I was making excuses for behavior. Oh, that's just how she is. I was dismissing other people's concerns because I cared and I thought it was just a phase. I thought it was just personality flaw. I thought it was just, oh, she's in this certain part of the world where they kind of sound rude when they talk. No, it was none of those things. None of those things. This is where I say there was emotional abuse because manipulation, talking behind your back and telling you you're a piece of shit is abuse. You can slap me, break a bone, I'll heal from that, right? But emotional and verbal abuse lasts so much longer. And that's what I think wore me down. Because I think we all believe that abuse is something we all recognize, right? Abuse doesn't always look dramatic in the moment. It could be you give me a dirty look from across the room because you don't like something I just said. You're creating chaos and confusion so that I don't see what's really going on. That can be abuse. You're telling me one thing, but I remember it a different way, but you're convincing me that I'm wrong. That's abuse. Manipulation is a form of abuse. The most disorienting part was I couldn't even name what was happening, because was it me? Was it her? Was it what I was dealing with? Was it life? Did I not get enough sleep? I couldn't even pinpoint the root cause for anything. But I knew that everything must have been my fault. I kept trying to make it make sense because I wanted the friendship to be good, but also because of my self-awareness. I wanted to course correct if I was failing as a friend, as a business owner, as a creator, as a writer, as whatever, a mom, a wife. I was just trying to course correct because I take that feedback and I say, how can I try and do better? And I was so confused by the feedback that it was like, well, you're just not doing anything right. And I still struggle with that. There are days where I still struggle with feeling like no matter what I do, I'm never right. I can never do anything correctly. And I have to fight that thought because words have power. And if I can never do anything right, then I'm never going to do anything right. I want to go back to telling myself I'm smart, I'm capable, I'm intelligent. I can learn anything I want to if I really put my mind to it. Because that's where I was this time last year, despite the couple of years of stress that I've been under. I have been telling myself, you are so damn smart, because I will find out I did something that later on it was a good damn thing I did it. And I really got out of that. This is where shame gets slippery, because once you realize in the aftermath of what was happening that you're not crazy, that this person really was an a-hole, and they really were doing these things, manipulating you, gaslighting you, talking behind your back, whatever it is, you start asking yourself, why didn't I leave sooner? And I think part of that is societal, right? How many times do we see a victim of domestic violence get blamed? Why didn't she leave? Why didn't she leave? It's the fear. It's the fear. And the fear for me was, I'm going to take this person and this person and this person and ruin your business, because they already said they would side with me. And so when I fired her, she stopped having that leverage over me. She stopped having that power over me. And that was more insulting to her. When I'm a friend, I'm a really good friend. When I'm an enemy, I don't know you. Shame, denial, and grief were like, and again, like I said earlier, I still struggle with all three of these things: shame, denial, and grief, right? Because how could I be so stupid? Like, how could I allow this to affect my family, my friends, my business, other people who believe in me? That only needed to be momentary. Because I had to be honest that I did feel shame and I did feel guilt. I didn't grieve the friendship. I grieved what I thought it was supposed to be, what I thought it was. And then I realized like it was never any of those things. So I had to grieve that I was in denial. I had to grieve that this person was probably never really my friend. And once I grieved that, all of that, it was easier to say, I'm not dumb. I just didn't see the gradual encroachment in my life, my boundaries, and my mental health. I felt so ashamed that I put up with it for so long. Normally, if I encounter something like that with people, it's not going to take 5 months for me to go, fuck you. But in this case, it did. And I don't think it had to do with the longevity of the friendship. I think it had to do with, I am a successful businesswoman. I have my ups and downs. Business is a roller coaster, but I am very successful in anything I want to do, anything I put my mind to. I have the ability to accomplish that. I want to see other people come up to. I want other people to come up to. I want people to change their lives doing what they love, doing what they're passionate about, talking about what they love, doing something they enjoy, doing something that feels fun, right? Because if you're making money doing something you love, then it doesn't feel like work at all. That's what I wanted. And I was losing that love, but I was also taught in all of this that they have to want it too. You can't want it more than they do. You can't bring up people who are not on the same level. as you. I'm on the level of I want to scale. I want to scale and scale and scale. I have goals. I have money that I envision giving my community. In my county where I live, they have one of the top veterans treatment courts in the US. They're in the top 5 in the US. I can't remember how many courts there are, but it's like over 200. Okay. And we're actually going to interview the judge who runs that program soon. So keep your eyes peeled for that. But they had a grant when they started this program in 2016 that they just ran out of. That grant lasted almost 10 years. I want to be able to pour into my community for services like that. And not even just for veterans, for anybody who made one dumb mistake that they can rebound from. I believe that incarceration isn't changing lives. Rehabilitation is, and rehabilitation isn't done when you're incarcerated. It is done when you are given the correct tools and the correct support. And I want to pour that into my community. And I realize shouldn't have those same goals, shouldn't have those same dreams, shouldn't have those same visions. You know, and I don't even see myself being part of this community forever, but I would pour into it because it's a community that could benefit from it. I felt relief and loss at the same time. But again, the loss wasn't about her. The loss was about the things I lost because of her along the way. The things I lost because she ripped a tornado through my life with her behavior. That's the loss I grieved. I didn't grieve the loss of her because I just didn't. But I felt so much relief. I felt so much relief that it's like when somebody's stepping on you and you can't breathe and they finally pick their foot up off of you. Denial was a survival strategy for me. I hate admitting that, but it was a survival strategy. Denial is probably what had me making excuses for behaviors that were not acceptable towards me and others. And at the end of the day, I can still grieve what I had hoped for, what I wanted it to be, but I can also be relieved that it's over. And I think I am relieved that it's over. And I think I'm finally in a place where I'm not going to have to talk about it again after this because it's going to be fully processed. And I'm learning that sometimes writing is how I process things, and sometimes telling my story is how I process things. I can move on from this. And none of those things that I said to myself during that time that were negative were true. I'm not a shit mom and I'm not a shit wife. Do I make mistakes? Absolutely. Am I perfect? No. But I am successful. And you know what? My stress level is not near as high as it was in those 5 months. Nowhere near that. And I have other things going on in my life that are pretty stressful. And still none of them are more stressful than somebody calling me up and sucking the life out of me every single day and screaming at me over every move I made, everything I said, everything that I refused to cave into and give to them. Nothing was still that draining, which also tells me I have the strength to be resilient. And I learned that in recovery. I also learned that I have the strength to get through anything because of the things I've been through. And I used to always say if that was the worst thing that ever happened to me, I would have it made. That's really where I'm at in life. So for me to come out of this feeling like I don't have to stop trusting people, I don't have to stop being vulnerable, I just need to be more discerning. And I need to be more discerning, really, at the end of the day. If somebody says something I don't like, I don't need to overthink it, but I don't need to just easily dismiss it either. I need to make a mental note and see if there's a pattern. And if there's not, we move on. And if there is, address it. The shame I felt then wanted me to believe that I should have known better. Shame wants me to believe that I should have known better. But the reality is, I was trying to survive a dynamic that kept shifting. The goalposts kept getting moved. I was always going to be on edge. I was always going to be second guessing every decision I ever made. Denial isn't always stupidity either. Sometimes it is just hope with blinders on. And I have to feel like that's what I was doing. I was just hoping that I was wrong. And one of the things I think about is I've been so used to being independent. I never really cared about having a best friend. I never called her my best friend. She called me that. And then I just adapted because that's what I do. And so I think part of that was, but this is supposed to be my best friend. And now I understand that that's, it was just part of the lesson I had to learn. I wasn't stupid. I was just way too hopeful about something that there was no hope for. The next question for me became, how do I trust myself again? And how do I trust other people again? And I had to tell myself, not everybody is this one person, so I can't judge everybody based off of this one person's behavior. I need to look for patterns and not at a mistake. One mistake. When I look back even further than that time, I realized there were actually a lot of red flags, but I really just didn't see them until we were in close contact every single day. Well, I am learning to rebuild self-trust, and learning to rebuild self-trust requires some introspection. It requires learning what trust with myself actually looks like again, because I thought I did this already years ago, and I did, but every day she chipped away at that, and now I'm having to rebuild it. The lesson I take from this is notice your body signals. If you're in fight or flight mode, why? If you wake up every day and you're worried about what fires you have to put out, why? If you're worried somebody's going to be rude to other people, why? If you just hear somebody's voice and you can't tolerate it, it just makes you like, oh, I just want to stab myself in the face. Why? Why do you feel that way? Your body is telling you something that it's trying to get your brain to recognize when that happens. And that sounds extreme, but that's what it took for me. So I guess I do everything in extremes. Take time and pause before saying yes. And this ties into just like boundaries in general. Are you at capacity? Are you doing this because you feel bad? Are you doing this because you feel obligated? Are you doing this because you're being pressured? Will this benefit you? Will you feel rewarded by doing this? Don't automatically just go to yes. Say no. You don't have to make an excuse for why the answer is no. Write things down. Now, I was saving my text messages for receipts, but write things down so that you don't have to question yourself. If somebody comes and says that's not what you said, no, that is absolutely what I said. And this is why I wrote it down. I had a friend who taught me use email. Use email when you need a response or a non-response, because the email is going to be the only thing that proves they had the chance to respond and didn't, or they did respond and they said something stupid. When people want to get you on the phone, it's because they don't want you to be able to track that response. And that's literally what this came down to with her. The text messages are what I had to look at to realize it was a one-sided friendship. She shut me out in some of my most vulnerable times. She wanted to hear every bad thing that was going on in my life, but then tell me I couldn't handle any of the good things. Check whether you're feeling grounded. Does this feel like it's a fit for you? Or are you feeling activated? Do I need to be defensive? Because however you answer that is going to tell you if that's a healthy friendship or not. Learn to trust your discomfort. If something doesn't feel right, you are probably right. I'm not going to say that every gut instinct is correct, but I knew it in my gut a long time before I knew it in my brain. And had I listened, it might not have gotten so out of hand, because I feel like by the time I did finally address it, it was way worse than it would have had to have been. It's way worse than it would have been had I addressed it months earlier. I don't need a disaster to believe myself. Patterns normally can predict the future. Not always, not in every case. And I guess the reason I say this is the patterns are data, right? Data right? We always talk about data analytics, right? I got to look at my analytics. When are people on? Who's watching my stuff? Patterns are data. Patterns are data. Patterns are data. And when you feel your gut sink, or you wake up every day and you wonder what fires you're going to have to put out, that is data. What is causing that metric? What is causing that metric? That is not drama. That is data. It is telling you so you can learn something from the data. Self-trust is sometimes pausing long enough to hear and understand yourself clearly. Once you start doing that, you realize how many tiny ways you've been taught to abandon yourself, to not believe in yourself, to gaslight yourself. And what self-abandonment looks like may not present the way you would think it does. We need to widen the lens of toxicity or abusiveness beyond the scope of just friendship, right? Because the things that I have discussed in this episode about this particular situation can actually occur in other places, right? They can occur with children, they can occur with parents, they can occur at work, coworkers, managers, husbands, wives, whatever, right? And that doesn't always mean that they're a bad person. Again, we're looking for patterns because patterns give us the data we need. Some of the things that we might do that make us more vulnerable to toxic friendships and relationships is saying yes when you really mean no, saying yes when you're at capacity, apologizing before you speak. If you are apologizing before you speak and you didn't do anything wrong, why? I keep saying why, because you need to be asking yourself these things. I wish I had done a lot more of that. If you are over explaining or explaining too much, why? Why? Do you feel the need to over explain because you feel like you have to justify your decisions? Why? Letting people cross lines because it's easier than confrontation. This is probably going to be the biggest thing that is going to impact you if you allow it to happen, because people will do what you allow them to do. People will do what you allow them to do. If you let them cross the boundary, they are going to continue to cross that boundary. And the more you allow them to do it, the harder it gets to shut it down. Ask me how I know. Letting people cross lines because it's easier than confrontation is avoidance. And if I've learned anything about avoidance, it is you can avoid it as long as you want, but eventually it's going to surface. And the longer you put it off, the worse it's going to be when you finally address it. And that's just my personal experience. Your mileage may vary, but I do feel like that's a pretty accurate personal experience. Last but not least, confusing being needed with being loved. I don't really know how I feel about that because I almost feel like it's self-serving to be needed. Maybe there's a reason why people like that feeling, but being needed is not the same as being loved. Just because somebody needs you around because of how it benefits them does not mean that they love you. Does not mean that they respect you. Does not mean that they care about you. And that was a very hard pill to swallow. I'm telling you, I didn't just get a piece of humble pie. I got the whole pie. I got the entire pie. And I was forced to eat it all at once because I avoided confrontation when I should have done it sooner. And there was no reason for that because I'm not afraid to do that. But in this situation, I was. I don't think that I had just a bad friendship. I think I had a pattern. And I think that I wasn't seeing the data. And I think it allowed me to putting off what needed to happen. And some of my biggest lessons have come from realizing I've been calling self-abandonment being nice. I was shrinking myself down to be pragmatic, to be flexible, to be adaptable, to be fair, to be nice. I was not benefiting from that. I also learned that access needs to be earned and not just automatically granted. As my business grows, as my success grows, as I meet more people, as I collaborate with more people, and as we begin to mentor more creators, right? My accessibility is going to have to narrow because I am only one person. That's why we have mentors. They have to sort of be my gatekeepers. And being easy to access is not the same thing as being easy to love. The people who The people who have access to me should be people who deserve that access, have earned that access, are entitled to that access. Not everybody is entitled to that access. This is a hard thing to admit, though, because it's also where the healing had to start for me. I want to talk about things that are working for me in the healing aspect of this journey. Learning to understand that not everything is about me, because that was another thing. I was starting to think everybody was always mad at me for everything. And not everything is about me. I haven't been that way in 20 years. And she got me back to that point. And I'm not going to say she. I am partially responsible for allowing this. I do not have to explain my no. I do not need to apologize because I need to take a break from the internet, from the phone, from people, and just do nothing, read a book, hang out with my dogs. I don't need to apologize for that. I'm entitled to that. I've earned that. And I deserve that. I'm no longer letting people misunderstand me. Do not take my kindness for weakness. Just because I'm nice and polite doesn't mean that I won't say no. Doesn't mean that I won't set boundaries. Choosing relationships that can handle honesty is so much easier. It is so much easier because I love constructive criticism because it's how we get growth. Like we always tell people who write their own books or make their own music, like, don't look at the reviews. The reviews aren't for you, they're for other people. And don't be upset by negative reviews, right? To me, negative reviews are how I learn what my audience wants. My very first book, somebody wrote, I really wish that the author would have done more character development. Bam! She gave me a 3-star review. That's okay. That is good information to know. Constructive criticism is not an insult. It is a bullet point for more data. How can you make yourself better? We should be able to talk with our friends honestly and openly about if they hurt our feelings or private things that aren't weaponized. You should be able to be vulnerable with your friends. I want relationships where I don't have to perform softness to be safe. I can tell you now that the people that do call me, that I do pick up for most often, accept me for who I am. Curse words, tattoos, attitude, snark. 4 days before I respond, they accept all of that. They accept my flaws, but they will also tell me you're being way too hard on yourself because I am my own worst critic. I am done over explaining myself to people who already decided they're not going to listen anyway. What's the point? Healing for me is learning to stay on my own side, trust myself. Before I wrap up, I want to leave you with a few questions to sit with. Where are you apologizing when you really just need to be honest? What boundary have you been calling rude when it was actually necessary? What would change if you stopped treating your needs like an inconvenience? I want you guys to pick one or all 3 of those, sit with it, and think about it. Because I firmly believe that we all do at least one of these on occasions. I hope you can learn from my story and my experience. 1, either that you're not alone, or 2, how to recognize the patterns and how to understand that patterns are your data. Patterns are your sign. You don't need a red flag. The pattern is the red flag. If you've made it this far, I want to thank you so very much for joining me today as we have this discussion. And I look forward to our next episode, which is going to have a very special guest from Canada. I hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day, and until next time.